From caves, secret tunnels, and odd dwellings, there's a lot of mystery and lore surrounding things found in the subterranean world. I'm your host, Leah.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Steve. Today we bring you strange stories from beneath the surface. This is Season 5, Episode 1, Underground.
If you have an appetite for the strange and bizarre, then pull up a chair and grab a spoon for another intriguing serving of Remnant Stew. Remnant Stew is gluten-free, organic, made from all natural, free-range ingredients, and guaranteed to provide the recommended daily serving of curiosity.
Well, in September of 2022, my wife and I, along with my sister and brother-in-law, were visiting our cousins in the United Kingdom. We stayed for a couple of days in Wales, one of the 4 parts of the UK. The countryside was stunning, and we were charmed by a lovely couple named Adrian and Rosie Carr. They are my cousin's son's mother and father-in-law, if you can follow that line there.
Cousin's son's mother and father-in-law.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
Take a left at Albuquerque.
Right. Rosie was kind enough to take us sightseeing. She said, "I want to show you a special place called the Big Dig."
The Big Dig.
The Big Dig. She went on to explain that it was a museum dedicated to Welsh coal mining. What she didn't tell us was that we were actually going to go down into an abandoned coal mine some 300 feet down.
Oh, nice.
At first we thought, oh, okay, cool. But then they took us into this room and fitted us out with miner's gear, including hard hats, lanterns, a miner's belt, a backpack, and an emergency oxygen supply.
This was more serious than just an
And
excursion.
spelunking.
Right, and also they took away our phones and cameras. Quote, "They could cause an explosion down there," explained a jolly retired miner who was conducting the tour. And then the big cage elevator came up to our level. That was the same elevator I had seen in How Green Was My Valley or October Sky or any other coal mining movie that you might have seen. Well, I took a look at my wife, and I saw she was about to panic. Okay, I'm going to show you guys a picture here. You can't see this one on the podcast, but can you look at my wife's face really closely there?
Yeah. Judy is...
Yeah. The rest of us are smiling. And what's funny, she thought she was smiling too.
Force the smile, the smile.
But she wasn't. I walked over to her and whispered that she didn't have to go down if she didn't want to. She replied that because her grandfather had been a coal miner, she felt like she really should, but she was nervous. We stepped into the cage, and I held her close as we descended into the dark ground. Fortunately, the mine shafts in the passages were equipped with electric lights. When we stepped out of the cage elevator, we were in a decent-sized area that was tall enough to stand upright, but as our guide led us along, he gave specific warnings that several of the passages were quite low. We had to duck our heads as we were led along. There were probably 15 people in our tour group, along with 3 or 4 retired miners. They explained to us the process of chiseling and pickaxing the coal out of the seams. A few of the seams were actually pointed out to us. I was surprised at how glowingly these retired miners spoke of the difficult jobs they had. Quote, "It was the best job in the world. I would go back again tomorrow," they exclaimed.
That's crazy. I can imagine.
Well, we learned that the camaraderie formed by a group of men working together on a very difficult task created a really tight bond among the miners. It was really common for them to sing together as they headed off to work in the mornings and also back home in the evenings. In all, we probably stayed underground for about 30 minutes. We were happy to be back on top again, but really glad to have been afforded the opportunity to go 300 feet below the ground.
That's impressive.
Our show today, we're going to be exploring some unique underground strangeness.
Underground strangeness.
Let's enjoy that phrase for a second.
Throughout the world, it's not uncommon to find abandoned tunnels of various sizes and configurations. The great majority of these have known origins, though, and well-defined purposes.
Right.
However, throughout Europe, and especially in the mountainous alpine regions of Austria and southern Germany, there exist hundreds of what has become known as the mysterious Erdstall tunnels.
Erdstall tunnels, all right.
They are mysterious because no one knows for sure who dug them or why.
Okay.
According to an article in Atlas Obscura, the word Erdstall is loosely defined from German as earth stable and can also mean mined tunnel. So like mined, M-I-N-E-D, tunnel.
Yeah, mined.
However, these Erdstals in question have the appearance, they may have the appearance of those from various types of mines, but there's no known mineral here to extract. So they're like mine-like tunnels, but without the minerals.
So it looks like a mine, but it's not really anything to mine there.
Exactly.
Okay.
So a separate article from amusingplanet.com suggests that the name Erdstal can also be translated as simply place under the earth. So what are they?
Yeah, good
These
question.
articles detail that the Erdstal tunnels are carved into smooth oval shapes, either horizontally or vertically, and tend to be quite narrow.
Okay.
Another peculiar detail is the existence of so-called choke points, or known as schlups. I like this word, schlups,
Slups.
or slip-outs. These extremely tight transition points tend to connect upper and lower levels of the tunnel, or occasionally parallel levels.
All right.
In addition, there's only one entrance to the tunnel, usually tucked away in an old settlement or hidden in a forest. So this really restricts the airflow in these tunnels. And one tunnel entrance actually was found in the kitchen of an old farmhouse.
Oh, wow.
So they were dug on purpose, not for mining, but why, we don't really know.
That's right. They really don't know.
And they were
So-
like, how long was it? Like 70 feet? Something
well,
like
they measure between 20 and 50 meters,
Oh,
or
okay.
65 to 164 feet.
Yeah, okay.
The Erdstal tunnels are very low, requiring adults a lot of the times to bend over, and in some cases even crawl on all fours in order to travel through them. The choke points are so narrow that it's difficult for adults to squirm through.
Okay.
So now that we know what they are, but who built them and why, and that is really where the mystery lies.
Mysterious.
No written record of the construction of Erdstal tunnels is known to exist.
Now, that's strange because there's so many of them, yet nobody knows.
That's right.
Nobody recorded, hey, we're going to dig tunnels for this reason.
And if they did record it, it's lost.
I see,
We lost that. In addition, any close examination of the tunnels reveals no clues as to their purpose. But there's, a lot of speculation.
I guess so.
Oh, I bet.
A few medieval tools have been recovered from the tunnels, which suggests that they may date back to the Middle Ages, some 700 to 1,000 years ago, but that's not definite.
No.
The tunnels are too small to use for storage. There's no sign that they were used for mining, and they would make very poor place for human habitation. And they're also not, you would think that maybe they're tombs, right?
Right,
But they weren't tombs because no human remains have ever been found in them.
Hmm.
The only somewhat plausible theory is that they were used as temporary hiding places to shelter from marauding tribes.
Oh, I can see that, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, the idea is that peasant farmers could take shelter in the tunnels while raiding hordes passed overhead. But one major problem with the theory is that the tunnels only had one entrance, which really
Yeah,
limited
you get found,
their
it's over.
Well, I don't know about that, because you could defend that.
Right.
If they could only, but the oxygen supply would. If you got a
Yeah.
lot of people down there, it really, there's not a lot of airflow, and the oxygen would run out.
Wow.
So some have suggested that the tunnels may have had a spiritual purpose. The tight choke points have been likened to the birth canal. I said it. And and the process of squirming through them may represent some type of new spiritual birth or new life.
I can see that. All right. Yeah.
Some more recent folklore, and you know how I love folklore, from Austrian mountain people suggests that the Erdstal were built by goblins.
Oh, okay.
Of course. Yeah.
Some suggest that they may have been constructed as way stations for deceased souls or as hideouts for ghosts and demons.
Way stations for to see. Look, so you got to wait here for a while until we determine where you're going on.
Well, kind of like
Like if you're flying anywhere, you gotta go through Dallas. Is that what the deal
a
is?
layover.
It's a
I
TSA
was-
security checkpoint.
I was
I
thinking
gotcha.
purgatory, but I don't know, layover, whatever. A collective of researchers known as the Working Group for Edstal Research. So there is a committed
Working group for Erdstal research. Okay.
There's a committed group for this. They're working to discover the truth behind the mysterious tunnels. Each year they convene to share their findings.
Okay.
Using new methods such as 3D surveying, this group hopes to someday find the true meaning of the Erdstal passageways.
Sounds like some wild conventions to go to, every year. No, that sounds pretty interesting.
Is
though,
it held
actually.
underground?
Yeah, maybe they hold a convention somewhere in one of those. Maybe in this next story, actually.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. That was an interesting story. Well, now you might recall our season 4, episode 12, titled "Odd Churches." We discussed several very odd places of worship in that episode.
That's right.
We touched briefly on a few that were actually underground, including one in Wieliczka, Poland. where miners in a working salt mine had carved out a series of small chapels in the salt. In fact, even Poland's favorite son, Pope John Paul II, had held services there. Well, those small chapels are nice, but they likely pale in comparison to the Salt Cathedral of Zipaquira, Colombia. And Zipaquira is spelled Zipaquira, but it's pronounced Zipaquira. According to an article on NPR.com, the Zipaquira Salt Cathedral is Colombia's most famous church. It's located some 600 feet below ground in an abandoned salt mine in the town of Zipaquira, which is just outside the capital city of Bogota. It's an architectural wonder. The shaft leading down to the church at first feels dark and dank with a faint smell of sulfur.
That's exactly what you want to smell on the way to church.
On the way to church. Give you a little reminder.
Fire and brimstone right there.
But as you descend further below ground, the shaft opens up and Roman Catholic statuary appears. There are 3 naves depicting the birth, life, and death of Jesus. Each of these opens onto the gigantic dome basilica, which is lit by a huge chandelier. At the end of the chandelier is an enormous floor-to-ceiling cross, which is backlit by purple lights. Oh yeah, and all this, the cross, the chandelier, the statuary, all made out of salt.
Oh.
Furthermore, this cathedral isn't just for tourists to gawk at. It is an active, living church. The pews, also made of salt, are jammed to capacity for each Mass. The acoustics are incredible, as evidenced when the church's choir breaks into a hymn or chorus. The first part of the sanctuary was built in the 1930s by miners as a place to pray. You know, mining is pretty dangerous work.
Right.
And so they would pray for protection from toxic gases, explosions, and other accidents.
Especially walking through the sulfur earlier.
Right, yes. No, don't anybody light a match. By the 1950s, most of the salt had been mined out, so the Catholic Church, which is pretty powerful in this country, we're talking about Colombia here, persuaded the government to construct the cathedral in the empty mine. By the 1990s, however, the original cathedral was deemed unstable and unsafe, so the government sent in architects who determined that going down another 200 feet would provide more stability.
Of course, you know.
Thus, a new cathedral was constructed deep into the abandoned salt mine with the help of retired miners and sculptors. The church is breathing new life into the local economy as tourists and religious pilgrims flock to visit the Salt Cathedral. On an average, more than 2,000 visitors per day come to worship in the cathedral or marvel at its amazing architecture. So, an amazing underground cathedral in Colombia.
Very cool. But, you know, it makes me think of those salt blocks that you give to cows, you know, or whatever, and they lick it. Like if I were a kid, I'd be licking the pew.
Right. They probably have signs, please do not lick the pew.
Hey, you. Yes, you there listening to this podcast. Have we told you lately just how much we appreciate you? Well, we do. So much. And so can we ask for a favor?
It's an easy favor. If you would, please take just a couple of minutes to give us a review on whatever app you're listening on. It may not seem like a lot, but it really does make a difference.
Yeah, it's all about algorithms, altruisms, Pythagorean theorems, all that techie stuff, which boils down to the fact that it helps other listeners and sponsors find us. So if you enjoy Remnant Stew, it would mean a lot if you took the time to give us a review. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks.
Right.
Well, the first half of the 20th century was certainly a violent time in Europe.
Yeah, that's to say the least.
The Great War, the largest conflict the world had seen to that point, raged from 1914 to 1918. This war was also inappropriately nicknamed the War to End All Wars.
Well, that's what they thought.
Yep.
We know a little bit better now.
This would be round 1.
Just 21 years later, it was renamed World War I because in that year, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, beginning World War II. This war lasted until 1945 and saw the deaths of more than 50 million people, more than double that of World War I. These two conflicts saw the first use of aerial bombing.
Okay.
Thousands
Makes
of
sense.
warplanes dropped millions of tons of munitions onto military and civilian targets throughout the continent. Of course, the damage during the wars was tremendous. It has now been nearly 80 years since the end of World War II, but the damage is still being done.
Oh, wow.
You see, as many as 10% of the bombs dropped back then didn't explode. They
Ouch.
just sunk into the ground, and they are still there.
Oh, wow.
According to BBC.com, there are still thousands of unexploded bombs in Germany, France, the UK, and in every country where fighting and bombing occurred. Several times a year in Berlin, neighborhoods have to be evacuated as bombs are discovered on construction sites and other work projects. In France, farmers pay close attention, very close attention, as their plows routinely unearth old ordnance.
Well, when you hear that plow go clang, you
Ting.
get off the
That's right.
tractor and run.
It's like, oh no. And why is he running a? Oh,
Yeah.
he
I
found
know.
another one.
In Wales alone, about 20 bombs are located each year. One French official estimated that it will be 500 years before all old explosives are found.
That's a lot of explosive laying in the earth.
That's right. In the years since the war ended, several thousand people have been killed or injured by latent explosives. Among the dead were members of bomb squad units who were attempting to defuse the devices.
Right.
Today, most bomb squad units utilize robots to do the most dangerous work, yet civilians are still subject to these hidden bombs.
Right.
An article in dailymail.com details the unfortunate 2021 case of a British couple and their family members who were on a post-marriage trip to the Carpathian Mountains near the Ukraine-Hungarian border. This was before the current conflicts arose in Ukraine.
Right.
Norbert Varga and his wife Lydia were hiking and camping with about a dozen friends and family. So they were celebrating their recent wedding.
Right.
Lydia was originally from Ukraine and was happy to be spending time back in her homeland.
Right.
The group was exploring the idyllic mountain scenery from the warmth of their campfire. Suddenly, the dream trip was transformed into a nightmare by an explosion. It appears that their campfire had been built right over a buried World War I bomb.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And in fact, that wasn't the first campfire to be built on that spot. That was like, a camping spot, and
Right.
that was where the campfire was. So, how many hundreds of times a campfire
Another
had
one's
been built there,
Yeah.
theirs was the lucky one.
Oh.
The fire became hot enough to detonate the buried explosive. According to the Daily Mail article, the bomb went off while they were telling stories and drinking tea. Lydia received severe wounds as shrapnel tore into her face, hands, and legs. She would survive, but unfortunately her brother Miroslav
Yeah.
and another friend would not. The article contains a photo that was taken just minutes before the explosion.
Yeah, I saw that photo, and it's just so heartbreaking. You've got these young people enjoying being out camping together and enjoying each
Right.
other and having a good time. They've just gotten married, and their families are together. And, they have no idea that their whole world's about to change just because of this thing right under.
That's
it's
right.
Really terrible.
And this
you don't know what's going to happen, I guess.
This camping trip was orchestrated just to get her brother and her new husband together and
Right.
to meet each other and enjoy each other. And
Yeah.
and before all of this, it was horrible. So their their campsite had been a battlefield in both world wars. It's thought that this bomb was from the Brusilov offensive, a bloody campaign waged by Russia against Austria-Hungary in 1916. This bomb had been underground for 105 years before it exploded.
105 years, just laying there.
And the
Just
camps and campers have been
They have been building a
building
fire
fires
over
over
it.
it. And
all
they
this
just
time.
happened to build one.
Yeah, it just happened to get far enough down underground and hot enough to
Right.
finally detonate it. It was just horrible.
Things underground are always moving, not fast, but slowly. I remember as a
Shifting.
kid, you could go
Yeah.
pick all the rocks off a pasture, and then 2 years later, there are more rocks there. They
That's right.
work their way up. And
Migration. It's rock migration.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, according to an article from FamilyTreeMagazine.com, back in 1876, the United States was celebrating its centennial.
That's
We're
right.
100 years old. We made it. Part of the festivities that year included a World's Fair held in Philadelphia. A journalist named Anna Deem had the idea of collecting important items from the celebration and locking them up in a fireproof cabinet and sealing it up for 100 years. These items included a scroll signed by members of the 44th Congress, an album with photographs of other prominent men, a gold pen from poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and photos by photographer Matthew Brady. President Ulysses S. Grant oversaw the ceremonial closing of the cabinet, which was to be stored in the United States Capitol building until 1976. Okay, so then in that year, President Gerald Ford was on hand for the ceremonial opening of the cabinet, and the items had all been very well preserved. Well, Anadim's idea of a time capsule set off a frenzy of time capsule activity around the country.
Right?
Unfortunately, the great majority of these were not stored in containers or locations that would allow for perfect preservation. According to an article from mentalfloss.com, one of the self-proclaimed time capsule nerds named Matt Novak, that's a good title, a time capsule nerd, okay? Anyway, he studies time capsules. He claims that 99% of the time, capsules wind up in disappointment. The items are either mundane or else they are unrecognizable. But he says there is always that 1% chance that keeps us in anticipation. Which leads us to this next story. 1957 was quite a year. Of course, the classic Chevrolet Bel Air came out. My grandmother had a pink one. It was also the year of Sputnik. And, oh yeah, something else important happened that year. I was born.
Oh, yeah, there it is. I mean, trumps all of them.
And in Tulsa, Oklahoma, it was the year of their 50th birthday as a city and as a state. The city of Tulsa decided to celebrate its birthday with a competition, and the winner would receive a brand new 1957 Plymouth Belvedere with only 4 miles on the odometer. Why was this car chosen? Well, according to the chairman of the 57 Tulsa-Rama Golden Jubilee celebration...
Tulsa-Rama, I love that.
Quote, the Plymouth Belvedere was an advanced product of American industrial ingenuity with a kind of lasting appeal that will still be in style 50 years from now.
Yes, he put on his announcer voice, people.
There you go. Why 50 years from now? Well, see, there was a catch to the contest. The winner would not be announced for 50 years. That's right. The winner of Miss Belvedere, as the car came to be called, would be the person who most accurately guessed what the population of Tulsa would be in 2007, which would be the city and state's centennial. More than 800 people entered the competition, jotting down their estimate of the city's future population on postcards mailed into the committee. These postcards, along with some other Tulsa memorabilia, were buried in a sealed steel container behind the car.
I'm sorry, that's a long time to enter a contest, from entering a contest to winning a contest.
Waiting to win it, yeah.
Nice.
50
That's
years.
crazy.
50 years.
Did they...
Eight.
Okay, keep going. Sorry. I'm going to let this sit.
No, go ahead, Phil.
No, I'm just going to let this ride. Keep going.
A huge reinforced concrete and steel container was constructed beneath the pavement of the Tulsa County Courthouse. On June 15th, 1957, it was sealed shut with Miss Belvedere waiting patiently inside. The keys were sitting on the driver's seat, ready for the new owner to start her up and take her home.
Oh, this is going to end well.
Because cars that just sit there
They
just
last
start
forever.
up and go on. Yeah.
Some prominent citizens wrote their names in felt tip marker on the car's hubcaps. So in 2007, as the date neared for the opening of the vault, a great amount of excitement bubbled in Tulsa. One gentleman named Forrest Brokaw, who had recently retired as the news director of the local NBC affiliate, had been working at the station as a teenager in 1957 when the car was buried. When interviewed, he stated, quote, "Whoever gets this car is going to own a pristine automobile, 50 years old, a classic and worth a lot more than the $2,000 that it sold for back in 57.
Oh, no. I can already see where this is going.
So finally, on June 14th, 2007, the big day came. A crowd of some 9,000 people gathered in downtown Tulsa to see the vault opened, and some perhaps hoping that they might be declared the new owner. But their joy turned to disappointment when workers broke open the side of the vault and outpoured hundreds of gallons of water.
I'm thinking this could have been, like, you could foresee this happening.
Well, for all of their nuclear age optimism and forward planning, the city fathers in 1957 had neglected to make the vault waterproof. Poor Miss Belvedere had been submerged in seeping groundwater for decades. A tow truck was employed to pull the car out of the vault. The extent of the damage was immediately seen by all.
Oh, of course.
The car had become a complete rust bucket. The rear suspension had collapsed and the frame was sitting on the axle. The interior was totally unrecognizable sludge. Let's enjoy that phrase for a minute. Totally unrecognizable sludge.
Sludge.
Surprisingly, the names were still visible on the hubcaps. A felt tip marker worked better than everything else. It was a total loss. However, as the steel container with the postcards and some other items, including a savings bond, which was now worth $700, was still intact, So who won the contest? Well, that distinction goes to one Raymond Humbertson. Unfortunately, he died in 1979. But he did have a 95-year-old sister named Katherine Johnson still living, and she was declared the winner. Of course, being the winner of a rusted hunk of metal that was somewhat shaped like an automobile is not all that glorious. But then in stepped a gentleman named Dwight Foster, who owned a rust removal company.
I'm thinking that's all that was rust.
Right.
Foster took on the project of restoring Miss Belvedere not to drivable condition, but at least to make her presentable. And she now sits in the Historic Automobile Attractions Museum in Roscoe, Illinois. Having learned
No
their
longer
lesson
in Oklahoma, folks.
Having learned their lesson about groundwater, the city of Tulsa has encased a Plymouth Prowler and an above-ground pressurized vault, which will be opened in 2057. And the story came to us from the Facebook page of a group called Top Secret Customs and Restorations. Now, not to end this section on a down note, the FamilyTreeMagazine.com article mentioned above, they did detail an amazing 2014 find. In December of that year, workers were repairing a leak under the Massachusetts State Capitol building in Boston when they came across a stout metal box near the building's cornerstone. It turned out that the box was laid there in 1795 by none other than American Revolutionary heroes Paul Revere and Samuel Adams.
Oh, wow, cool.
That's awesome.
The box contained several 18th century coins, medals bearing the image of George Washington, and a silver plaque that had been engraved by Revere himself. All items are in good condition, so you see, you never know. That time capsule buried in your town just might be the 1%er.
We have a time capsule in Montgomery. Did you know that?
I didn't know there was one in Montgomery.
There is. Okay, so Montgomery is one of the oldest towns in Texas.
It's close to Cut and Shoot, folks. Right
It's
here.
close to Cut and Shoot.
They're neighbors.
And it was the time capsule was put in 1987.
Okay.
So I'm thinking like VHS tapes.
Well, that was the. It could
Yeah,
be.
it was the sesquicentennial of Texas.
Right?
That's
yeah.
right. The
Yeah.
150,
86, yeah.
150 years, 150 years,
years,
of Texas, and it's going to be dug up in 2037.
All right.
And so, the only thing that I know is in there are letters from school children back in 1987.
I was teaching in Montgomery.
So,
and
yeah.
I lost a pair of socks back then. I wonder if they might be in there.
One of your students put it in
right.
their letter.
Probably so.
And now for something completely off topic and off kilter. Brace yourself for the oddity du jour.
It's hardly a new situation under the sun for someone to lie for gain. And with the ever-increasing reach of modern media, outlets for lies to get spread far and wide are within arm's reach for politicians, insurance agencies, and those pesky car salesmen who swear that they have the best deal in
Yeah,
town.
no kidding.
Or they're trying to find you for...
Yeah, that extended car warranty.
Right.
That's right.
However, there have likewise always existed those who have exploited the far reaches of media for a laugh, whether just for their own pleasure or even to expose just how detrimental the quick turnaround of the news cycle can be. Here are some of our favorite examples through the centuries.
Oh, this will be fun.
So, way back in 44 BC, there was a propaganda campaign orchestrated by Octavian against Mark Antony that hoped to cast aspersions on his credibility as a Roman. Coming directly after the fall of Octavian's uncle, the famous Julius Caesar, there was a power gap that Octavian hoped to fill.
Oh, he said he was a Roman in name only. Is that right?
Right. So his campaign against Antony involved tying Antony so tightly to Cleopatra as his mistress that he would be perceived as an Egyptian first and Roman second, thus calling into question his ability to lead Rome.
That was a pretty successful
Yeah.
successful campaign.
These accusations were a stretch of the truth at best, but yes, were extremely successful.
Right.
So much so that coins began to be produced with cheeky remarks along with the likeness of Antony on one side and Cleopatra on the other.
Yeah.
Remnants remain today. We
Still see
find
those.
them. Octavian emerged from the power struggle and renamed himself Augustus Caesar. If you don't recognize Octavian, you probably recognize Augustus Caesar. The first Roman emperor, as prior to himself, Rome was a republic with elected representatives. Augustus did away with the republic, naturally not wanting to risk his rule. So
That's a smart move on his part if you can get by with it.
Yeah. So now we'll jump forward to 1835 for a much more famous example of fake news, the Great Moon Hoax. The Sun, a New York newspaper, began in August to print what would become 6 whole articles on the recent discoveries of life on the moon. Mostly animal in appearance, these articles described, along with artistic renditions, bat-like humanoids, bison, zebras in miniature, unicorns, etc., etc. I'd love a mini zebra myself.
Right.
And they had seemingly built a wonderful life for themselves, as there were also temples and villages discovered. That's in air quotes as well.
He's doing air quotes, folks, in the studio.
In the studio. Readers were bewildered at the detail that the newest in telescope technology had produced and were quick to spread the news far and wide, soon creating a nationwide sensation. Richard A. Locke, the self-proclaimed author of this hoax, had a clear reason to commit this fraud. He'd grown frustrated at the more extravagant astronomical theories that had been taken as truth and often contradicted the previous theories posted, creating information whiplash for any of those spaceheads trying to follow along.
I see.
He created the hoax to underline that while a story may be sensational and exciting by prospect, it didn't mean it had any basis in reality, and that the quick adoption of the hoax as truth is proof that we are much more prone to believe what we want to believe, especially when the alternative is comparatively dull reality. There is no life on the moon.
Boring.
Oh, man. So now that came from what paper? What was the name of the paper?
The Sun.
The Sun.
So the Sun was putting
fun,
out
yeah.
fake news about the moon?
The Sun and the moon.
Shame.
That was mudslinging, I'm telling you what.
Now let's jump
Shining some
over.
darkness.
Yeah. Let's jump over a century to 1974, when residents of Sitka, Alaska, awoke to a horrific sight. Mount Edgecumbe, a historically dormant volcano on the edge of town, was smoking.
That'll get your attention.
Yeah, the resulting
What
panic.
was it smoking?
Yeah.
Sorry, couldn't help myself.
Move along, Phil.
The resulting panic from a seemingly impending eruption led residents to call police and firefighters to what? Remedy the situation? I mean, what are they going to do?
Fan it out.
Yeah, I say just get out of there. And I wouldn't be calling anyone except some distant relatives, maybe to clean out that guest bedroom.
Mom, I'm coming home.
Yeah. Anyways, the Coast Guard was deployed by helicopter to check the situation from the air. And upon cresting the mountainside, came upon the sight of dozens of car tires ablaze alongside a large spray painting of April Fools. Yes.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
This was a very elaborate April Fool's joke by local prankster Oliver, moniker Porky, Bicker. If anyone-
Porky.
Yeah, I
Porky
think Porky
Bicker.
is a good name for this guy.
Yeah, right.
Bicker, along with a handy friend with a helicopter, good to have one of those, gathered 70 tires into a pile on the mountainside and lit them on fire in the early hours of the morning for the residents to see as they awoke. He did
No, wait a minute. Didn't somebody see them like hauling tires with a helicopter?
you would think,
in
but
the
they did
days
it in the
before?
dead of the night.
Maybe they did it at Nalia. There you
Yeah, they never heard anything. They were sleeping through it.
That's right.
Now, he did his due diligence, or so he thought, as he had forewarned the local authorities. If you're going to pull off a prank that big, you probably should call
They didn't-
somebody.
Yeah.
They didn't read their email.
Right.
guess.
Well, and the Federal Aviation Administration, but had forgotten the Coast Guard,
Right.
who's got their number anyway. Luckily for him, once the hoax was fully realized by the locals and the volcano wasn't in fact erupting, the reaction was uniformly positive. The Associated Press picked up the story and spread it far and wide, and it goes down as one of the best April Fool's pranks of all time.
But you know,
Yeah.
it smelled pretty.
Oh,
it
yeah,
was,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was nasty.
Pretty. Yeah, pretty.
Well, I got my sources from Forbes, Wikipedia, thesocialhistorian.com, and kiteandkeymedia.com.
Well, I'm glad to hear that fake news is not a new phenomenon.
Right.
In our episode of season 4, our episode 14 titled Outlandish Artifacts, we talked a little bit about the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Right.
These are ancient manuscripts that included copies of most Old Testament books of the Bible and other materials related to Hebrew culture and Judaism.
Good.
They were discovered in a series of caves beginning in 1947 when a shepherd boy was looking for a lost sheep.
Yeah, right.
Well, in 2021, it was announced that an additional set of scrolls have been found in a different cave
Oh,
in
they
that
found
region.
more.
region.
Okay, nice.
Okay.
And unlike the other Dead Sea Scrolls, archaeologists believe they know who wrote these. According to an article in Conversation.com, in 132 AD, a man named Simon Bar Kokhba led a small but determined group of Jews in a rebellion against the Roman ruling authority.
Right.
Like earlier Jewish revolts, this one didn't go particularly well.
Right. No.
There was something
They tried hard, but no, it didn't work.
There was something about a bit different about these folks, though. Rather than Hebrew, these were Greek-speaking Jews.
Right.
Evidently, they had at one time left their homeland and were living in a section of Egypt where Greek was spoken and had returned to Israel to fight against the Romans. When their revolt faltered, these people retreated to a cave high up on a cliff overlooking the Dead Sea. The entrance to the cave was 250 feet down from the top of the canyon ridge and over 300 feet up from the bottom.
That's a long climb.
Yeah,
Of the steep edge.
The canyon walls were nearly perpendicular. So these folks must have used, they had to have used rope ladders to access the cave. On top of the ridge, archaeologists have located the remains of a Roman encampment. It's likely that Roman soldiers pursued the rebels to this point and then just waited them out until they starved to death.
Yeah.
Today, the cave is known as the Cave of Horrors.
Wow.
In 1955, when the cave was first accessed, researchers were greeted by dozens of skeletons.
Oh man!
Oh, well, that would explain Cave of Horrors.
Cave of Horrors. That's right. These skeletons showed no sign of battle trauma. The rebels were very fierce in their determination not to be captured by or surrendered to the Romans. So they basically stayed in the cave until they wasted away of starvation.
Yeah.
In 2021, a more thorough examination of this cave revealed many personal items and a set of scrolls. The scrolls were written in Greek and contained portions of the Old Testament books Nahum and Zechariah. In fact, these are some of the oldest fragments of the Old Testament books known to exist.
That's amazing.
That is amazing.
Archaeologists are excited about the find. They say that it raises the possibility that there may even be more scrolls in the area.
Oh, that's pretty cool. You know, it makes me think of, you heard the famous story about the Masada, the Jewish fighters that were fighting against the Romans, and then they didn't want to be captured, and so they retreated to this hilltop that was like sheer sides and all around. The Romans surrounded them. They wouldn't surrender. And instead of being taken captive, they killed each other. That was part of their.
Oh wow!
That was part of their code. You know, they would kill each other
rather
so
than
they
be
wouldn't have
captured.
to commit suicide. They would kill each other, and rather than being taken captive. Really interesting.
Oh wow!
Well, you ever like poking around construction sites? I know when my wife and I are out walking around our neighborhood, anytime there was a new house going up, okay, we'll kind of walk through it and see how it looks, you know?
I was wondering if you were going to go there, if you were going to admit to trespassing.
Yeah, well,
Take the tour.
They leave the door right open.
Right. Well, I do the exact same
You know,
thing,
they
so I
don't-
can't.
They like people to look in there because you never know, they might be a buyer. So, you know.
That's right.
Check out the floor pan, folks.
Well, we recently ran across a couple of articles about weird items that were found on construction sites. One is from lovethegarden.com and the other from ranker.com. Now, earlier we mentioned that in Berlin, it is very common to find unexploded bombs left over from the world wars of the past century. But did you know that there's a place in the United States that also has this issue? It seems
really?
It seems that in Orlando, Florida,
All the weird stuff happens in Florida.
a real estate developer decided to build a new housing development on an area that had been used for target practice by the military during World War II. And you guessed it, during construction of the streets and homes, several unexploded bombs were uncovered. After the first few were located, the United States Army stepped in and did a thorough, we hope, exercise to clear the area of live bombs. We hope they didn't miss any. Now, back to those two articles concerning weird construction site finds. Several of these finds involved unearthing long-forgotten cemeteries.
Yeah.
Oh wow!
These
That
include a
happens.
project in Manhattan to build a new federal building, which turned up a cemetery from the late 1600s, an apartment complex in Philadelphia, which had been the site of an old church and graveyard, and a swimming pool in New Orleans, which was on the site of an 18th century cemetery. You know, cemeteries in New Orleans are odd because they don't even bury under the ground, right?
Well, I don't. It all depends because I know
Parts of
that
New York are, yeah.
there are cemeteries all over the place, and there's one particular. It was a slave cemetery that
Right.
they built a road right over,
I
so
guess-
they are in the ground.
I see. So maybe parts of the city may be higher, but I know some places the water table is so high they can't really
They can't bury them in the ground.
underground.
Yeah,
You have to bury
that's
them
right.
on top, like mausoleum style. Other odd articles from construction sites include whale bones under a light rail dig in Edinburgh, an ancient Maya ball court under a housing project in Mexico.
like a tennis court.
I don't know what they were playing, some kind of ball.
Interesting.
A 1,500-year-old Byzantine church underneath a highway in Israel, a fossilized woolly mammoth tusk under an apartment building in Seattle, and a medieval hospital underneath an Apple store in Madrid.
Underneath an Apple store.
That's where you need one of those Erdstall tunnels.
Right.
That's
right.
Crawl into the Apple store.
Okay, now I've got one more here, but I'm kind of bending the rules here. But it's not exactly underground, but this item was found on a construction site, and it was too cute to leave out. So in 2015, a contractor in England named Lewis Shaw was demolishing an old house to make way for a new one. While tearing down the old chimney, he noticed a piece of paper floating out. Upon picking it up, he was stunned to see that it was a letter to Santa written by a little boy in 1943.
Oh, cool.
The letter had been placed in the chimney for Father Christmas to read, and it goes like this. Dear Father Christmas, please can you send me a Rupert Annual? I'm not sure what a Rupert Annual is.
Me neither.
And a drum box of chalks, soldiers and Indians, slippers, and any little toys you have to spare. Love, David.
Aw.
Oh, cool.
Lewis began inquiring within the longtime neighbors who knew who David was and that he was still living in the area. Happily, Lewis returned the letter to David, who was quite surprised to see it.
I bet. That's a cool story.
Oh, wow.
That's a cool story. Well, off the northern coast of Scotland is located an island group known as the Shetlands.
Oh, yeah.
These islands are probably most notable for the diminutive Shetland ponies who are bred there. They're also known for the Shetland sheepdog or Sheltie, an energetic dog. Originally, they were bred to herd sheep,
Right.
but they're a pretty popular pet.
Yeah, my brother used to have Shelties.
Yeah. But there's something else notable about the Shetland Islands, a very unusual rock called the Dwarfy Stain.
The Dwarfy Stain.
The Dwarfy Stain. So stain is an Old English word for stone.
Uh-huh.
The Dwarfy Stain is a nearly 28-foot long rock that sits partially buried in a gently sloping, barren valley on the small Shetland island called Hoy. Rather than being an outcrop of some rocky undersurface, the stone appears to have been deposited there by retreating glaciers from the last ice age.
Okay, just got left over.
Just dropped off.
Dropped it
That's
off.
dropped
there.
off.
Okay.
And so what's the big deal about this? Lots of places have these kinds of rocks,
Yeah.
but what makes this one special is that some 5,000 years ago, this rock was hollowed out by an unknown people.
They hollowed out the rock.
Wait.
And maybe it's the Erdstall people. I don't know.
Yeah. That's what they were trying to
And afterward,
Where do we put that rock?
Afterward, they figured, it's really too hard going through this rock. We should just go through the ground.
That's right.
Well, good thinking.
According to a website called orkneyjar.com, what makes the Dwarfy Stain remarkable is the fact that the massive stone was hollowed out using nothing but stone or antler tools, muscle power, and patience.
That'd take a long time.
That's a lot of chipping, folks.
A round opening was cut into the west side of the rock, and then a large chamber was hollowed out of the red sandstone. And inside the chamber, 2 level bed-like areas were cut.
Okay.
These beds are much too small for anyone of normal stature. This rock has become the source of an abundance of dwarf folklore on Hoy Island, hence the name Dwarfy Stain.
Okay. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
The stone's resemblance to a hermit's hovel has led some to believe that it's the home of hermits, or that it was the home of hermits. In fact, people were once in the habit of leaving offerings at the hermit's door, which sounds like life goals to me.
Yeah.
Like if you could just be a hermit and have everybody leave
Just
stuff
leave
at your door.
stuff. Yeah.
But it's not outside the realm of possibility that hermits may have occasionally dwelt there, but that's not likely what the original purpose was of the
Okay.
Dwarfy Stain. Most archaeologists believe that the Dwarfy Stain was actually a rock-cut tomb. If so, it would be the only one known to exist in the British Isles, though. There are other rock tombs with similar features located in the countries surrounding the Mediterranean. But again, this is the only one in the UK.
Further north, okay.
The Dwarfy Stain has been the source of much folklore in the area. In his novel, Sir Walter Scott alludes to the stone's function as the favorite residence of Trollid,
Okay.
a dwarf famous in the Viking sagas. In fact, that's the word that troll is derived from.
Okay.
These sagas would have been well known by the Vikings who invaded the British Isles in 795. They recorded in their journals that when they came upon the stone, it was still sealed.
All right.
Oh.
They managed to open it and found nothing inside. The Dwarfy Stain remains a mysterious sight and is a popular stop for a handful of tourists who managed to travel to this remote island in the North Atlantic.
Oh.
So really cool. And in the history of the Vikings,
That is
they wrote about it.
interesting. Yeah.
Right. Those islands are so beautiful and scenic. You know, they're hilly and green, and yet then you've got this kind of rock that sticks out.
Have you been there?
I haven't been to this island, no, but of the picture I saw.
It's going to be on his next travels.
Well, put it in there, yeah.
Sir Kraken on the entrance.
Get Sir Kraken with us to going there, yeah. I have been to this next place, though. Well, not exactly. I've been to the city where this is. Back in the United States, we head to the famous Ohio River city of Cincinnati.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I love that show back from the 70s. WKRP in
Cincinnati.
Remember the great Turkey Thanksgiving Day?
Yes.
I've seen that
Yes.
all over my
Yes.
posts forever for the last.
Well, trade from the river and numerous canals helped to make Cincinnati one of the 10 largest cities in the United States in 1900. But with the advent of rail, the canals had become less important to the city. Oh, yeah, here's a fun fact. Can you name the enormous manufacturing company that makes Cincinnati its home? We mentioned it on one of our previous episodes. This was on our beginnings episode.
I'm not going to say anything because I have the script and I can read it, but I wouldn't have been able to come up with it.
That's none other than Procter & Gamble.
Oh, wow.
Procter & Gamble,
Okay.
one of the huge... And if you remember that story, I'm getting off track here, but there was... Procter & Gamble were two guys that married sisters. One was like a candle maker, one was a soap maker, and they were both talking about having trouble finding supplies. And their father said, "Why don't you guys work together?" And so they started working together.
Well, there's an idea.
Yeah, there you go. The girl's father put them together, and that's where Procter & Gamble got. Anyway.
Have you guys ever talked to each other?
Back to the canals. Two canals, the Miami and the Erie, cut right through the heart of the city. These two had become problematic as the breeding grounds for mosquitoes and other diseases.
Oh.
People had also begun dumping unwanted junk in them, and they were becoming eyesores. So in 1916, kind of bad timing here, the good citizens of Cincinnati voted overwhelmingly on a plan that would turn the old canals into a subway train system. It was going to be a 16-mile project, and it was budgeted to cost $6 million. However, before ground could be broken on the project, the United States entered World War I. By the time the war was over, there was a shortage of construction supplies and costs had skyrocketed.
Mm-hmm.
Despite these delays, 2 miles of the underground section was completed in 1923, but the entire budget had already been exhausted by that time.
Right.
And so the rest of the project lay unfinished. In 1926, the mayor of Cincinnati tried to revive the project by building a highway over the top of a section of the already completed subway. He estimated that it would take another $10 million to complete the subway, but the voters were reluctant to throw good money after bad. The stock market crash of 1929 dried up any possible source of funding for several years. A new study in 1948 resulted in mothballing the subway project for good. So, for the past 75 years, various proposals have been made as to the possible use for the 2 miles of unused subway that were completed. When I say subway, there was no train or rails down there. It was just the space, the tunnels for them. Yeah.
Right.
During the Cold War 1950s, it was thought that it could be possibly a workable bomb shelter. Other proposals have included a shopping mall, a groovy nightclub, and a massive wine cellar. Who needs a wine cellar 2 miles long? I don't know.
2 miles long of a wine cellar,
Yeah.
or a nightclub.
Well, anyway, today the 2 mile section, which includes 4 stations, still lies dormant under the Queen City streets. The entrances are all sealed off, and the public is discouraged from entering the abandoned underground.
Discouraged. I bet they still do it.
Yeah, people still get in.
Have you met any teenagers that wouldn't do this?
Well, have you ever lived in a house that had a basement? Either of
Yes.
y'all?
Yeah.
I grew up in a house with a basement, and that's where we all, we played down there all the time. I loved it. Well, you've probably noticed that a basement stays cooler than the upper floors of the house.
Right.
And this can be really nice if you live in a hot climate. And we live in a hot climate, but we don't have basements here because
oddly enough, we don't have basements in the greater cut and shoot area not very much. I don't know really know why.
It's the water level, I think, the groundwater.
Probably, yeah.
The cool basement can make a nice place to retreat from the heat of the day. But what if your whole house was a basement?
Ooh.
Nice.
According to articles in Smithsonian.com and also BBC.com, there's a town in the Australian outback where such a case exists. Now, here's the thing. We talked about Dwarfystain. That was a weird name. Well, how about the name of this town? Coober Pedy.
Coober Pedy.
Coober, Pedy, Peddy.
Interesting.
Right? It's located in South Australia, about 500 miles north of the coastal city of Adelaide.
But who are we to argue with cut and shoot?
True. We come from cut and shoot. The name Cooter Petty loosely translates from the Aboriginal language means white man in a hole.
Okay.
Right?
That's pretty descriptive.
And it's appropriate name because some 60% of the town's 3,500 people live in subterranean homes.
That's cool.
Cooper Petty.
But Cooper Petty.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a big town, 3,500 people living underground, more than half of them.
That's awesome.
About 100 years ago, a teenager discovered the perfect opal stone in the sandstone plains of this region. I love opals.
Oh, yeah.
The excitement over this find set off an opal mining boom. Opals are still mined in the area. In fact, it is estimated that some 70% of the world's opals come from here.
Oh, wow.
Cooper Petty bills itself as the opal capital of the world.
Oh, we should have included that on that Capitals of the World oddity we had a couple of seasons back. Yeah, the opal capital of the world.
It's the opal capital. Right. Of course, where there are mines, there also have to be not miners.
Yeah.
But remember, we're talking about the Australian outback, a region where the summertime temperatures routinely reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 49 degrees Celsius, and where winters can also be surprisingly cold.
Yeah.
Right.
This dry region has no trees from which to build structures, so the early miners found adequate protection from the scorching heat and winter cold in the mines
Yeah,
themselves.
to stay in the mines.
Stay down. Yeah.
Several years of opal mining has left hundreds of man-made underground caverns. The location of these caverns is marked by an immense pile of dirt
Okay. Yeah, that
and
makes sense.
rock waste, or what's called mine tailings.
Uh-huh.
So like huge ant hills. So
The
like
stuff
when
out of the mine that they didn't want to take.
Yeah.
That's
They had to
right.
dig out,
Exactly.
so we're like giant ants, and it's making these big ant hills. The town is filled with literally hundreds of these sandstone cone-shaped piles. And fun fact is, the old movie, 1985 Mel Gibson, Tina Turner movie, Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome,
Oh, right. Yeah.
was filmed in that area.
Oh,
So that's,
that makes more sense.
Yeah.
But upon further examination, you'll notice that many of these piles have a white pipe sticking up out of the ground next to it. These pipes are ventilation shafts, and they mark the locations of where people live in there.
Oh, okay.
As mentioned above, the early miners found relief from the heat of the day by staying in the mines. By the 1960s, the town was prosperous enough that the miners' families started joining them.
Okay.
The abandoned mine shafts were enlarged to accommodate the miner's wife and children. And then the soft sandstone it's relatively easy to carve, and rooms can be made as large as you want in any shape that you want.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Today, it's quite common to find 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes, or dugouts, as they're called by the locals. And regardless of what the temperature is outside, it always remains a pleasant 73 degrees inside. And that's 24 hours a day, every day of the year.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's right. Not only is this comfortable, but it's also inexpensive. All of Cooper Petty's electricity comes from solar and wind power. To air condition a normal-sized building in this extreme climate would be just absolutely expensive.
Prohibitive, I would think almost, yeah.
And other benefits include 0 insects. Quote, when you get to the door, flies jump off your back. They don't want to come into the dark and the cold, says one local resident. The town is also remarkably quiet, and the stargazing is terrific at night, as there's very little light pollution. I would
The lights underground.
love that.
Yeah.
So let's say you're living in an underground home and you find out that you have a baby on the way. All you need, and you need more space. So all you really do is get out your pickaxe and start hacking away. Simple as that. There's a new nursery right there.
I think we're going to take this section and we're going to extend it 20 feet.
Yeah.
And honestly, like if you start doing that, it's not unheard of for a renovation project to actually make money by finding more opals.
Right.
Oh, yeah, right.
One man
I just ran into my neighbor. Oh.
Well, and we're going to
watch
talk
out for
about
that
that.
too,
You
yeah.
got to watch. Yeah, you do have to watch. That's probably one of the drawbacks is that, if you go too far, you've just connected your home to your neighbors. But one man was adding a shower to his home when he discovered a large opal sticking out of the wall. A local hotel during a renovation project found opals that were valued at nearly $1 million.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, the town does have a subterranean hotel as well as a museum, a church, a movie theater, several restaurants and bars.
Yeah, and there is no light pollution because it's all down.
Yeah.
And of course, yes, you do have to. I don't know if they have like real significant maps of the area so that you don't just dig into the hotel or to the next
There's the surveying group that's literally just doing,
ground penetrating
radar just to make sure. All right, Bob, you've got 10 more feet going east, and you're going to hit Rick. Just saying.
And I wonder how they surveil,
Sorry about that, mate.
But anyway, some of the dugouts in Coober Pedy are quite luxurious.
I bet.
One has an underground swimming pool.
All right. Nice.
Several others boast game rooms, formal dining rooms, expansive bathrooms, and high-tech living rooms. Some have carved elaborate bookshelves right into the sandstone walls. And I'm getting Flintstone. No, I'm getting Flintstone
in real
vibes.
life right there.
Yeah, you go to Minecraft. I'm thinking Flintstones. But yeah, it is. It is like Minecraft
today.
Yeah.
I know.
We're dating ourselves when we say Flintstones, and they're all going, I saw that on YouTube the other day. It was kind of weird.
Anyway, we've got some stunning dugouts here, says local resident James Wright, who explains that the residents are notoriously private. Another luxury when you live underground. So you only tend to find out about these dugouts when you're invited over for dinner.
Okay.
You might wonder why more places don't follow Coober Pedy's subterranean example. And one large drawback that most places would have is the presence of groundwater.
Right.
Coober Pedy is extremely dry. There's not much groundwater to deal with. The exhaust pipes are sufficient to remove moisture resulting from human activities, and so mold and seepage they're really not problems. This would not be the case for most locations in the world,
yeah,
especially
very dry,
like right here.
Yeah.
The residents of Coober Pedy are very happy with their unique living arrangements. The town even boasts an annual Opal Festival, which welcomes guests from far and wide. The Smithsonian article ends by saying that there really is no other place like Coober Pedy, on or below the earth.
Oh, I see what they did there. Pretty clever.
That's advertising, folks.
Pretty clever.
That's good marketing, people.
And if you want to know any more about what we've covered in this episode, go to our show notes below, and there will be a link to our transcript where all of our sources are listed.
Is it my turn?
It is
I
your
can talk
turn.
now?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Hey, thanks for spending this time with us. Check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Remnant Stew Podcast. You can also send us an email to say hi or to suggest a topic for a future episode. To staycurious@remnantstew.com.
Remnant Stew is a part of Rook and Raven Ventures and is created by me, Leah Lamp. Steve Meeker researches and writes each episode that we then host together. Our audio producer is Philip Singfeld. The oddity du jour is brought to you by Sam Lamp. Theme music is by Kevin MacLeod and voiceover by Morgan Hughes. Special thanks goes out to Brandy Nichols and Judy Meeker.
Well, now, before you go, please hit the follow button so you won't miss an episode. Head on over to Apple Music and leave us a review. We love reading those reviews. Share Remnant Stew with your friends, your family, that coal miner's daughter who lives next door. And until next time, remember to choose to be kind and always stay curious.